The 12-hour drive from Kansas City to Denver gave me too much time to think about why Marcus hadn't returned my calls in 6 months. When I knocked on his apartment door that Thursday evening, the surprise on his face told me everything. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked, blocking the doorway like I was selling vacuums. At 68, after losing Martha just 18 months ago, I needed my son more than ever. "Can't a father visit?" I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. He reluctantly let me in, suggesting we grab a beer at O'Malley's pub down the street. The moment we sat down, Marcus excused himself for a phone call. That's when Jenny the bartender grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and whispered urgently, while showing me her phone screen. "Your son's been drugging elderly customers. You're next. Go to the bathroom now. Climb out the window. Trust me." On her screen, I saw security footage of Marcus dropping something into my untouched beer. My hands trembled as I pushed open the bathroom window, not from fear, but from a cold fury I hadn't felt since my forensic accounting days. The alley behind O'Malley's reeked of stale beer and rotting garbage, but I barely noticed as I crouched behind a dumpster, watching the pub's back exit. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged, speaking rapidly into his phone. "Yeah, he's probably passed out in the bathroom by now. Give it another 10 minutes, then Eddie can help me get him to the car. Old fool actually thinks I missed him." His laugh cut through me sharper than the October wind. I followed him at a distance, my worn sneakers silent on the wet pavement. We wound through Denver's industrial district until he entered a warehouse with no signage, just a rusted number 14 barely visible on the brick. Through a grimy window, I glimpsed what destroyed the last shred of faith in my son. 5 people sat around a folding table covered in laptops and cell phones. The far wall displayed a grid of photographs, each showing an elderly person's face with notes scrawled beneath. My blood froze when I recognized Harold Jennings, my neighbor from Kansas City, who died suddenly last spring. A red X marked his photo. "Patterson's old man is loaded," Marcus announced to the group. "Former forensic accountant widow, no other family checking on him. Classic Mark. I've been setting this up for months, telling everyone he's showing signs of dementia." A thin woman with sharp features responded, "The Walkers netted us $300,000 last week, but this Patterson score could hit $2 million if you've done your homework. Already got Dr. Hensley ready to sign competency papers," Marcus said, pulling out a folder. "Dad trusts me completely. Kept mentioning Mom left some insurance policies he hasn't touched. Probably doesn't even remember the passwords anymore." I pressed my phone against the window, recording every word, while my heart shattered with each revelation. The conversation turned to their methods, befriending lonely seniors, gaining their trust, then using a combination of drugs and psychological manipulation to access their finances. They called it harvesting. Like these precious souls were nothing more than crops to be reaped. "Remember, we need to move fast on Patterson," said a muscular man reviewing bank documents. "My contact at Sunset Hills says they can only hold the room another week without a deposit." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Once we get him committed, I'll have full power of attorney. Then we can clean out everything, including that property in Scottsdale he mentioned once." I nearly gasped aloud. The Scottsdale property was a vacation home Martha and I bought for our retirement, which we'd kept private from the children until we updated our wills. How had Marcus learned about it? The sharp-featured woman pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Current victim count stands at 37 successful extractions, 8.4 million in total acquisitions. 3 unfortunate complications, but all ruled natural causes. 3 unfortunate complications. 3 red X marks on elderly faces. 3 families mourning grandparents whose deaths weren't natural at all. Jenny's getting suspicious at the pub," warned a younger man with a neck tattoo. "Maybe we should switch locations." Marcus waved dismissively. "She's nobody. Some bleeding heart bartender worried about her regulars. Besides, after tonight, we're moving operations to Colorado Springs anyway." They continued discussing their victims like business investments, each story more horrifying than the last. Mrs. Chen, whose grandson they impersonated to drain her savings. Mr. Williams, committed to a memory unit after they convinced his family he was dangerous. Dorothy Baker, who changed her will days before her sudden passing. I recorded until my phone battery hit 15%, then carefully retreated to my rental car, parked 3 blocks away. Sitting in the darkness, I reviewed the footage with shaking hands. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, and cheered at every baseball game, had become a monster who preyed on the vulnerable. But they'd made one fatal error. They assumed Charles Patterson was just another lonely, trusting old man. They didn't know I'd spent 30 years investigating financial crimes, building cases that sent hundreds of criminals to federal prison. They didn't know that retirement hadn't dulled my skills, only given me time to perfect them. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the opposite side of town, ordered black coffee, and made my first call. Rita, it's Charles Patterson. I know it's late, but I need to report an elder fraud ring operating out of Denver. Yes, I have evidence. No, this can't wait until morning. I paused, steeling myself for the next words. The ringleader is my son. Special Agent Rita Hawkins met me at a Motel 6 near the airport at 2 in the morning. Even after 15 years since our last case together, she looked ready for battle in her FBI windbreaker and steel-gray determination. I handed her my phone with the warehouse recording, watching her expression harden with each passing minute. Charles, I'm sorry, she said when it finished. No parent should discover something like this. Save the sympathy for the victims, I replied, accepting the bureau laptop she offered. What do you have on this ring? Rita pulled out a thick file that made my stomach sink further. We've been tracking unusual patterns in elder financial crimes across Colorado for 8 months. Similar MOs, but we couldn't connect the cases until now. Your son's name never surfaced because he's been careful using aliases and shell companies. She showed me victim profiles that matched the photos on the warehouse wall. Each file contained heartbreaking details. Life savings vanished, retirements, destroyed families torn apart by suspicion and guilt. The 3 marked deceased all died within weeks of their accounts being drained, ruled natural causes by overworked coroners who never looked deeper. We need you to go undercover, Rita said. With your testimony and continued evidence gathering, we can dismantle this entire operation. I'm already undercover, I corrected her. Marcus thinks I'm a naive old widower ready for fleecing. Let's use that. We spent 3 hours developing a strategy. Rita assigned 2 agents to shadow me and provided specialized recording equipment that looked like everyday items, a pen that captured audio glasses with a hidden camera, a wallet with GPS tracking. As dawn broke over the Rocky Mountains, I drove to Wells Fargo to secure my actual assets. The branch manager, Thomas Peterson, greeted me with uncomfortable formality that immediately raised red flags. Mr. Patterson, what brings you in so early? His fingers drummed nervously on his desk. Just wanted to review my accounts while I'm visiting Denver, I said casually, though my instincts screamed something was wrong. Peterson's face went pale as he pulled up my information. There seems to be a note here. Someone called last week, claiming to be you, said you'd lost your passwords and needed emergency access. And I kept my voice level despite the rage building inside. We didn't process it, of course. The caller couldn't answer the security questions, but they had significant personal information, including your social security number and Martha's maiden name. Marcus had already started his assault before inviting me to Denver. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, but a carefully planned betrayal. I thanked Peterson, then asked him to flag my accounts with additional security protocols and document any further attempts. My next stop was supposed to be breakfast, but a nagging suspicion drove me to check something else first. I logged into the online portal for Northwestern Mutual, where Martha's life insurance was held. The password still worked, but when the account loaded, I stared at a balance of 0. The $500,000 policy we'd maintained for 40 years, meant to cover final expenses and leave something for our grandchildren, had been cashed out 13 months ago. 1 month after Martha's funeral. The digital signature on the withdrawal form was Marcus's poorly disguised but legally sufficient for a grieving family's transaction. I sat in the bank's parking lot, remembering the day 8-year-old Marcus asked to practice my signature for a school project about parents' jobs. I'd guided his small hand, showing him the loops and flourishes, praising his dedication to getting it right. That innocent moment had become a weapon against his mother's memory. The fury that rose in me wasn't hot, but cold, the kind that sharpens focus rather than clouding judgment. They'd stolen from Martha. They'd desecrated her final gift to our family. This was no longer just about stopping criminals. It was about avenging the woman who'd given Marcus life. I called my daughter Diane in Boston, choosing my words carefully. As a prosecutor, she'd want to take official action immediately, but I needed her to play a different role. "Diane, honey, I need you to prepare some legal documents for me." "Yes, everything's fine. Just updating some estate planning. Can you create a revocable trust with very specific conditions? I'll email you the details." After ending the call, I checked into a different motel under the name Charles Mitchell, paying cash. Rita had warned me Marcus might be monitoring my credit cards. In the dim room that smelled of industrial disinfectant, I opened the FBI laptop and began my real investigation. Marcus's digital footprint revealed a web of deceit stretching back 2 years. Fake social media profiles used to research targets. Email accounts linked to dating sites where he posed as a caring grandson looking for advice about elderly relatives. Bank accounts in the Caymans and Belize, showing regular deposits matching the theft amounts Rita had documented. But one email thread stopped me cold. Sent 3 months before Martha's death, Marcus discussed with someone named Derek about accelerating the timeline on MP. The response chilled me. Same method as the Thompson situation. Gradual substitution, no traces. I cross-referenced the dates. Robert Thompson, a name from the warehouse victim board, had died of heart failure 6 weeks before Martha. Same condition, same sudden decline after years of stable health. Same convenient timing for their beneficiaries. My hands trembled as I searched deeper, finding coded discussions about medication, swapping dosage calculations, and disposal methods. The truth crystallized with horrifying clarity. Marcus hadn't just stolen Martha's insurance money. He'd murdered her for it. I stumbled to the bathroom, dry heaving as memories flooded back. Martha's confusion about her pills not looking right. Her complaint that the pharmacy must have changed manufacturers. My reassurance that generic medications often varied in appearance. I dismissed her concerns, trusted the system, trusted our son, who helpfully picked up her prescriptions. When the nausea passed, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at the stranger in the mirror. The grieving widower was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. Marcus thought he was hunting a sheep. He was about to learn he'd cornered a wolf. I returned to the laptop and began building my trap. Using skills honed over decades of investigations, I created a digital maze of false leads and honeypots. Fake investment accounts with just enough money to seem real, but laced with FBI tracking markers. Forged documents hinting at offshore holdings worth millions. A trail of breadcrumbs leading exactly where I wanted Marcus to go. Then, I did something that would have made me sick just hours earlier. I practiced acting senile. In the motel mirror, I rehearsed confused expressions, trembling hands, and vacant stares. I mumbled about forgotten passwords and mixed up memories until the performance felt natural. If Marcus wanted a victim, I'd give him one, right up until the moment the trap snapped shut. I returned to Marcus's apartment the next morning, shuffling my feet and letting my hands shake slightly as I knocked. When he opened the door, I made sure to squint, like I couldn't quite recognize him. "Marcus, that is you, right? Sorry, son. I got a bit turned around finding my way back. These Denver streets all look the same." The relief that washed over his face made bile rise in my throat. "Dad, where have you been? I was worried sick when you disappeared from the pub." "Pub." I let confusion cloud my features. "Oh, right, we went for beers. Must have dozed off somewhere. These new medications make me so foggy." He ushered me inside with exaggerated concern, pressing a cup of coffee into my hands. I noticed him watching carefully as I struggled to remember where to sit, finally choosing the wrong chair. His eyes glinted with satisfaction. Over the next 3 days, I gave an Oscar-worthy performance of cognitive decline. I'd start sentences and trail off, forgetting my point. I'd ask him the same questions repeatedly. Most importantly, I'd mention financial details just out of reach. "Your mother had some system for the passwords," I'd mutter, patting my pockets. "Something about our anniversary and her mother's birthday. Or was it her grandmother's?" I watched Marcus take mental notes, saw him text rapidly when he thought I was napping. He started leaving papers around the apartment forms with large print about protecting your assets and planning for the future. I'd pick them up with shaking hands, squinting at the text, asking him to explain the big words. On the second night, while Marcus was in the shower, I used the FBI pen to photograph documents scattered on his desk. Power of attorney forms already partially filled out. Medical evaluation requests with Dr. Hensley's signature, predated. Brochures for Sunset Hills Memory Care, with handwritten notes, lockdown unit available, and no family visitation first 90 days. Among the papers, I found something that nearly broke my cover. A sympathy card from Martha's funeral, where I'd written a heartfelt message to Marcus about always being there for each other. He'd used it to practice forging my handwriting, the margins filled with attempts at replicating my signature. I also discovered a burner phone hidden in his kitchen drawer. The contacts list read like a crime syndicate directory: Eddie the Enforcer, Dr. H. Colorado, Karen Tech Tommy. The text messages detailed their recent victims and upcoming projects, including one labeled Operation Inheritance, with my initials and expected value of $4.5 million. They'd researched everything: my investment portfolio, the house value, Martha's jewelry collection still in the safety deposit box, even the classic Corvette I'd restored with Marcus when he was 16. Every piece of our life together had been cataloged and assigned a dollar value. On the third morning, I made my big play. During breakfast, I patted my shirt pocket frantically, then relaxed. "Thank goodness, still there," I mumbled, pulling out a worn envelope. "What's that, Dad?" Marcus leaned forward with poorly concealed interest. "Oh, just some old bank information. Martha kept saying we should put it somewhere safer, but I like keeping it close. Gets confusing with all those computer passwords nowadays." I made a show of checking the envelope's contents, letting him glimpse what appeared to be account numbers and routing information. In reality, they were the FBI's bait accounts, each one a digital trap waiting to spring. "Maybe I should help you organize those, Dad. Make sure they're secure." "Would you?" I smiled gratefully. My memory's not what it used to be. Sometimes I forget which accounts are which. Martha handled all that modern banking stuff. That afternoon, Marcus suggested we visit a specialist about my memory concerns. Dr. Hensley's office occupied a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax service, hardly the prestigious medical facility one would expect. The doctor, a thin man with nervous eyes and coffee-stained scrubs, barely examined me before launching into a prepared speech about cognitive decline. "Mr. Patterson shows clear signs of moderate dementia," he declared after 5 minutes of basic questions. "I recommend immediate intervention, possibly residential care for his own safety." I played along, mixing up the date and struggling with simple math, while the FBI glasses recorded every moment of this sham evaluation. Dr. Hensley eagerly signed forms, declaring me incompetent, his handwriting as shaky as his medical ethics. Later, as Marcus drove us back, he kept glancing at me with barely contained excitement. "Don't worry, Dad. We'll find you the best care. Somewhere safe where you won't have to worry about finances or passwords or any of that confusing stuff." That evening, I met Jenny at a coffee shop in Aurora, while Marcus believed I was napping. She looked exhausted, dark circles under green eyes that held the same rage I felt. "My grandmother raised me," she explained, sliding a folder across the table. "When she died last year, everyone said it was natural. She was 87, had heart problems. But she was healthy the week before telling me about the nice young man who'd been helping her with errands. The folder contained her own investigation photos of Marcus entering her grandmother's house bank statements, showing gradual withdrawals medical records, indicating a sudden spike in heart medication levels that the coroner dismissed as accidental overdose. I couldn't prove anything until I got the bartending job and saw him targeting other seniors. I've been documenting everything, waiting for someone who could actually stop them. I shared what I'd learned, watching tears form in her eyes when I explained the scope of the operation. We strategized together, and she agreed to play a crucial role in the final act. "He killed them," she whispered. "My grandmother, your wife who knows how many others. Prison isn't enough." "Prison is just the beginning," I assured her. "By the time I'm done, Marcus will lose everything he values: money, freedom, reputation, and any chance at the life he murdered others to achieve." Back at Marcus's apartment, I found him on the phone with his accomplices discussing their plans for me. The FBI pen captured every word as they debated whether to use the gradual method or risk a faster approach, given my apparent rapid decline. "The old man's practically gift-wrapping himself," Marcus laughed. "Keeps talking about Mom's secret accounts and forgotten properties. Eddie, you still have that connection at the property records office?" I retreated to the guest room, sending the audio file to Rita, while maintaining my confused facade. The net was tightening, but we needed them to make the first real move. That came the next morning, when Marcus cheerfully announced he'd scheduled a family meeting at the courthouse. "Just to make sure all the paperwork's in order," he said with a smile that no longer resembled my son. "Diane's flying in from Boston to help sort everything out." I acted grateful while recognizing the final phase of their plan. Get family consent for institutionalization, lock down power of attorney, then systematically drain every account while I rotted in a memory ward. What Marcus didn't know was that Diane and I had been coordinating through encrypted messages. The prosecutor daughter he'd dismissed as too busy with her career was about to show him just how much he'd underestimated the Patterson family. The morning of the courthouse meeting arrived gray and drizzling, matching the storm building inside me. I shuffled around Marcus's apartment, deliberately mixing up my shoes and asking 3 times what day it was. Each confused moment brought a satisfied smirk to his face that he didn't bother hiding anymore. "Remember, Dad, we're just making sure you're taken care of," he said, straightening my jacket with mock tenderness. "The judge needs to see you're not capable of managing complex finances anymore." I nodded vacantly while the FBI wire recorded his words. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd spent the previous night executing the most important performance of my life, one that would destroy him completely. Unable to sleep after overhearing Marcus on a late call discussing the same cardiac solution we used before, I'd accessed his laptop while he snored. His password, laughably, was Inheritance 2023. The encrypted folders inside contained a digital confession of murder, spreadsheets detailing medication substitutions, email threads with Derek about acquiring pharmaceutical alternatives, most damning photos of pill bottles before and after tampering, including one that made my blood freeze. Martha's heart medication dated 2 weeks before her death. I copied everything to the FBI server, then did something risky, but necessary. I created a hidden folder on his desktop, labeled Dad's Passwords, and filled it with the fake account information. The metadata would show I created it during my confused, late-night wandering, another sign of my declining mental state. But the real discovery came from his deleted files, which Marcus hadn't realized could be recovered. 6 months of text messages between him and his ex-girlfriend Valerie, discussing their daughter Sophie, a child I never knew existed hidden from the family because Valerie threatened to expose Marcus's criminal activities if he sought custody. My granddaughter. Martha had always dreamed of grandchildren, spent her final years hoping Marcus would settle down and start a family. He denied her even that truth, keeping Sophie secret while plotting her death. Dawn found me at Martha's grave the first time I'd visited since beginning this nightmare. I knelt in the wet grass, pressing my hand to the cold granite. "I failed you," I whispered. "Didn't see what he'd become. Didn't protect you. But I promise Martha he'll pay for what he's done. And if there's a child out there, I'll find her. Give her the love you never got to share." The cemetery groundskeeper found me there an hour later, mistaking my genuine grief for confusion, and gently directing me back to my car. Another witness to my declining mental state, though he didn't know it. By 8 o'clock, I was back at Marcus's apartment playing up my confusion about the courthouse meeting. "What judge? Why do we need Diane there?" I asked repeatedly, each question making Marcus more confident in his plan. The drive to the courthouse became a masterclass in manipulation. Marcus played concerned son perfectly, asking leading questions about my finances that I answered with just enough accuracy to keep him hooked. "I think Martha mentioned something about accounts in... Was it Phoenix No Flagstaff? Or maybe both?" I scratched my head, letting frustration creep into my voice. "She had this whole system with multiple banks for security. Said we couldn't be too careful." "Don't worry about it, Dad," Marcus soothed, while his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "We'll sort it all out. That's what family's for." Family. The word tasted like ash from his lips. The courthouse steps were slick with rain as we climbed them. Marcus kept a firm grip on my elbow, playing the dutiful son, while ensuring I couldn't wander off. Inside the corridors echoed with footsteps and muffled conversations. I recognized several faces in the crowd, but maintained my vacant expression. "Patterson, hearing room 240. Marcus told the security guard who directed us to the second floor. The courtroom was smaller than expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps. As we entered, I cataloged the attendees with practiced ease, while appearing overwhelmed. Marcus's 4 accomplices sat in the front row, dressed in their Sunday best to play concerned family friends. Eddie the enforcer had squeezed into an ill-fitting suit. The woman I'd seen at the warehouse, who Marcus called Colorado Karen, wore pearls and a practiced expression of sympathy. Dr. Hensley fidgeted with his medical bag, and Tech Tommy typed rapidly on his phone, probably monitoring my fake accounts for activity. Behind them sat 12 elderly individuals and their family members. Marcus glanced at them dismissively, assuming they were waiting for other hearings. He didn't recognize the victims whose photos decorated his warehouse wall, now present to witness justice. Harold Jennings's son sat rigid with suppressed fury. Mrs. Chen's daughter clutched tissues. The Baker family filled an entire row. Jenny stood near the back exit in her bartending uniform, as if she'd just gotten off shift. "Charles!" Diane's voice cut through the murmur as she entered every inch the Boston prosecutor in her sharp black suit. She hugged me, whispering, "Stay confused, Dad. It's almost over." Marcus barely acknowledged his sister, too focused on the judge entering the chambers. The Honorable William Nash looked every bit the small-town official Marcus expected, gray-haired, tired-eyed, shuffling papers, with bureaucratic indifference. "This is a competency hearing for Charles Patterson," Judge Nash intoned. "I understand there are concerns about Mr. Patterson's ability to manage his affairs." Marcus stood eagerly. "Yes, Your Honor. My father has shown rapid cognitive decline since my mother's death. As his son, I'm deeply concerned for his welfare." The performance that followed would have impressed Broadway. Marcus presented his evidence, the medical evaluation from Dr. Hensley, testimony from his accomplices about my concerning behavior, even security footage from various locations showing me looking confused or lost. Just last week, he disappeared from a restaurant and was found wandering downtown. Marcus lied smoothly. He's mentioned hidden bank accounts, forgotten properties, passwords he can't remember. It's heartbreaking, but he needs professional care. I played my part perfectly, asking the judge twice who he was, and calling Marcus by the wrong name once. When asked about my finances, I rambled about Martha's special system and accounts in cities I'd never lived in. Dr. Hensley testified with practiced lies about my cognitive tests, brandishing fake medical charts. Eddie discussed finding me, confused and disoriented, outside the warehouse district. Each accomplice added their rehearsed concerns, painting a picture of a man desperately needing institutionalization. Through it all, Judge Nash took notes with apparent disinterest, occasionally asking clarifying questions that seemed to support Marcus's case. The victims' families shifted restlessly, some crying quietly as they watched this charade play out. Finally, Judge Nash turned to me. "Mr. Patterson, do you understand why we're here today?" I stood slowly, gripping the table for support. Marcus leaned forward, anticipating my confused response that would seal the deal. The accomplices smiled. The victims' families held their breath. And I dropped the mask. "I understand perfectly, Your Honor," I said clearly, straightening to my full height. "We're here because my son murdered my wife and has been systematically robbing and killing elderly citizens across Colorado." The courtroom erupted. Marcus jumped up, face cycling through shock, rage, and fear. "Dad's having an episode. This is exactly what I was talking about." But I was already pulling out the FBI pen, clicking it to project audio onto the courtroom's AV system. Marcus's voice filled the room. The old man's practically gift-wrapping himself, just like we did with Mom gradual substitution. "Your Honor," I continued calmly as FBI agents flooded through every entrance. "My name is Charles Patterson, retired chief forensic accountant for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. For the past week, I've been undercover documenting a criminal enterprise responsible for over $8 million in elder fraud, and at least 4 murders, including my wife Martha." Judge Nash stood, his tired demeanor vanishing. "Agent Nash, actually. FBI Financial Crimes Division." He pulled out his badge as Marcus's legs gave out. "Mr. Torelli, you have the right to remain silent." The next few minutes were chaos. Eddie tried to run, but found Jenny blocking his path with 2 officers. She smiled coldly. "For Grandma," she said, as they cuffed him. Colorado Karen screamed about entrapment, while agents secured evidence from her designer purse. Dr. Hensley fainted, his medical bag spilling forged documents across the floor. Tech Tommy frantically tried to delete files from his phone before agents wrestled it away. But Marcus just stared at me with the stunned expression of a con man who'd been thoroughly conned. As agents cuffed him, I walked over and looked into the eyes that once gazed up at me with childhood innocence. "Every transaction you made on those fake accounts triggered federal markers," I explained quietly. "Every password you stole led to a dummy database. Every move you made was documented, cataloged, and prepared for prosecution." "You knew," his voice cracked. "The whole time. From the moment Jenny warned me. You thought you were hunting a confused old man. You never considered that the confused old man might be hunting you." As they led him away, I pulled out one more piece of evidence. "By the way, I know about Sophie. Valerie's been in protective custody for 3 months, telling us everything. Your daughter will grow up knowing her grandfather loved her, even if her father only saw her as a potential inheritance source." The mention of his daughter finally broke through Marcus's shock. "Sophie, you can't. She's mine." "She's family," I corrected. "And unlike you, I understand what that means." As the agents cleared the courtroom of Marcus's crew, the real proceedings began. The victims' families moved forward, no longer anonymous faces, but survivors ready to testify. Judge Nash, now fully revealed as Agent Nash, called the court to order with federal authority. "This concludes a 10-month joint operation between the FBI Financial Crimes Division and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation," he announced. "Mr. Patterson, please present your evidence." For the next 3 hours, I laid out the case with prosecutorial precision. Using the courtroom's display system, I showed financial records, audio recordings, and video surveillance that painted a complete picture of the organization's crimes. The worst evidence came from Marcus's own files. I displayed the medication substitution spreadsheets, explaining how they developed a system for gradually replacing heart medications with placebos, causing seemingly natural cardiac events. The courtroom gasped when I showed Martha's pill bottle photos date-stamped 2 weeks before her death. They studied each victim's medical history. I explained, my voice steady, despite the pain. Calculated exact timelines for substitution to avoid autopsy detection. My wife noticed her pills looked different, but I told her it was just generic variation. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Jenny testified next, presenting her evidence about her grandmother's death. She'd kept the pill bottles which tested positive for sugar pills, labeled as cardiac medication. The elderly woman who'd raised her, who'd survived the Depression and 2 wars, was murdered for $100,000 in savings. Harold Jennings Jr. spoke about his father's sudden death after befriending someone matching Marcus's description. The Chen family revealed how their matriarch's entire life savings vanished days before her fatal heart attack. Story after story painted a pattern of calculated murder disguised as natural death. But the most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. Valerie Morrison, Marcus's ex-girlfriend, entered under federal protection. Thin and haunted, she clutched a folder of documents. "I met Marcus 5 years ago," she began nervously. "Got pregnant within 6 months. When I told him, he said a baby would interfere with his business opportunities. That's when I started paying attention to what business meant." She revealed how Marcus had tried to use their infant daughter as a prop to gain elderly victims' trust. When Valerie refused, threatening to expose him, he abandoned them both, but not before stealing her identity to open credit cards. He said if I ever contacted his family or went to police, he'd make sure I had an accident like his mother, Valerie testified. "I've been hiding for 3 years, working cash jobs trying to protect Sophie from her own father." The courtroom sat in stunned silence as she produced recordings of Marcus discussing his plans, including one where he debated whether Sophie would be worth more as an insurance policy or a sympathy tool for future cons. Throughout the testimony, Marcus's accomplices turned on each other like the rats they were. Eddie, facing multiple murder charges, offered to testify about the entire operation structure. Colorado Karen claimed she was just following orders, throwing Marcus under every available bus. Dr. Hensley blubbered about student loans and financial pressure, as if debt justified murder. But Tech Tommy provided the most comprehensive betrayal. In exchange for reduced charges, he handed over the organization's entire digital infrastructure, client lists, financial records, communication logs, and most crucially, a detailed journal Marcus kept of every crime. He called it his inheritance insurance, Tommy explained. Said if anyone ever crossed him, he'd burn them all. Documented everything like he was proud of it. The journal, displayed page by page, revealed Marcus's complete moral bankruptcy. He'd rated victims by vulnerability, celebrated successful extractions, and showed zero remorse for the deaths he'd caused. One entry, dated the week after Martha's funeral, made me grip the witness stand. Inheritance secured. The old man suspects nothing too wrapped up in grief, considering whether to wait the respectful year or accelerate timeline for him too. Depends on how cooperative he is with account information. He'd been planning my murder while I mourned his mother. As evidence mounted, the scope became clear. The organization had operated in 6 states, targeting over 200 elderly victims. The FBI revealed connected cells in Arizona, Nevada, and Texas, all using Marcus's playbook. What started as a local crime ring had metastasized into a national crisis. Mr. Patterson's cooperation has given us the blueprint to dismantle this entire network, Agent Nash announced. We've frozen approximately $12 million in stolen assets and expect to recover more as investigations continue. But the real moment of justice came when I revealed my final piece of evidence. During my week undercover, I discovered Marcus maintained detailed video records of his crimes, apparently for training purposes. The FBI tech team had recovered them all. I warned the courtroom before playing selected clips. The footage showed Marcus and his crew laughing about victims, reenacting how they'd gained trust, mocking the elderly victims' confusion as medications took effect. In one particularly damning segment, Marcus demonstrated his mother's handwriting to teach others forgery techniques. She taught me cursive when I was 7, he joked on camera. Finally paying off. The victims' families wept openly. Several had to leave the room. But they needed to see this, needed to know their loved ones hadn't died naturally or accidentally. They'd been murdered by predators who saw their kindness as weakness. Marcus watched his empire crumble with increasing desperation. When Agent Nash announced federal murder charges carrying potential life sentences, he finally broke. "Dad," he screamed as agents prepared to transfer him to federal custody. "Dad, please. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Mom was sick anyway. The doctors said her heart was weak. I just sped things up." I stood slowly, walking to face my son one last time. The courtroom held its breath. "Martha's heart wasn't weak," I said quietly. "She had a minor condition managed perfectly by medication. Medication you replaced with sugar pills. You didn't speed anything up, Marcus. You murdered her. And for what money? You've now lost freedom you'll never see again. A father's love you killed along with her. I'm your son." He was crying now, the calculated criminal replaced by the desperate child I once knew. "You're supposed to protect me. Help me." "I am helping you," I replied. "I'm giving you what you denied your victims justice. Maybe in 25 to life, you'll find the humanity you lost. But I won't be waiting." The agents led him away, his sobs echoing through the courthouse. Colorado Karen spat at me as she passed, screaming about entrapment. Eddie muttered threats that would add years to his sentence. Dr. Hensley begged for mercy he'd never shown his victims. As the courtroom emptied of criminals, the victims' families surrounded me. Some offered condolences, others gratitude. Harold Jennings, Jr. shook my hand with tears streaming down his face. "You gave us closure," he said simply. "Now we know the truth." Jenny hugged me tightly, sobbing for both our losses. "Your wife would be proud," she whispered. "You honored her memory with justice." But Valerie's approach meant the most. She carried a small photo, handling it like precious crystal. "This is Sophie," she said, showing me a picture of a bright-eyed girl with Martha's smile. "She's 4 now, been asking about her family. Would you like to meet her?" I stared at my granddaughter's face, seeing Martha's kindness already shining through despite her father's darkness. More than anything, I managed through tears. Martha always wanted grandchildren. 6 weeks after the trial, I sat across from Marcus in the federal detention center. He'd aged a decade in Day's orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his diminished frame. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen before: fear. 25 to life, he said hollowly. My lawyer says with good behavior, maybe 15. I'll be 60 when I get out. If I get out. I let the silence stretch, studying this stranger wearing my son's face. Finally, I spoke. Do you know why you failed, Marcus? Not the technical reasons. The real reason. He shrugged, still not meeting my eyes. You underestimated everyone, I continued. Me, Jenny, your victims. You saw age as weakness, trust as stupidity, love as something to exploit. But your biggest mistake was underestimating yourself. That got his attention. What? You could have been brilliant at legitimate business. You had the intelligence, the charisma, the work ethic. But you chose the easy path, preying on those who loved you, instead of earning success. Now you'll spend decades wondering what you could have achieved honestly. Don't pretend you care, he snapped with a flash of old venom. You destroyed me. Your own son. No, Marcus. I stopped you. There's a difference. And I need you to understand something. I leaned forward, ensuring he heard every word. I spent 30 years building the FBI's Elder Fraud Division, wrote the training manuals, developed the investigation protocols, created the very tracking systems that caught you. His eyes widened as the implications hit. You built the trap before I was even born. I built it to catch criminals. Never imagined my son would walk into it. I pulled out a folder, sliding it across the metal table. Your complete criminal history analyzed using every technique I developed. Want to know the irony? You followed my own playbook for financial crimes, just inverted it. Every mistake you made I'd already documented in training materials you could have read if you'd ever shown interest in my actual career. Marcus opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning page after page of analysis. His crimes dissected with surgical precision, each error highlighted and cross-referenced to FBI training documents I'd authored. "Why show me this?" he asked finally. "Because you're going to have 15 to 25 years to think. I want you to understand that every skill you misused could have been applied legitimately. Every moment you spent planning crimes could have built an honest fortune. Every person you destroyed could have been a client partner or friend." "Friends," he laughed bitterly. "Like Eddie and Karen, they sold me out in seconds. Because you surrounded yourself with criminals who shared your values. Betrayal was inevitable." I stood to leave, then turned back. "One more thing. Diane's been appointed special prosecutor for financial crimes affecting the elderly. She's using your case as the template for new federal legislation. It's being called Martha's Law." "Mom's name on the law that destroyed me," he muttered. "Poetic. Your mother's name on the law that will protect thousands of elderly citizens from predators like you. Her legacy isn't your crime, Marcus. It's the justice that came from it." I left him there staring at the evidence of his failure. Outside the detention center, Rita Hawkins waited by her government sedan. "How did it go?" she asked. "He's starting to understand. Whether he'll learn from it." I shrugged. "That's up to him now." Rita drove me to my next appointment, the federal building where I'd spend the afternoon training new agents. Using Marcus's organization as a case study, I taught investigators how to recognize and prevent similar crimes. Every technique my son perfected became a lesson in protection. After the session, a young agent approached nervously. "Mr. Patterson, I just wanted to say, what you did turning in your own son. I don't know if I could be that strong." "Strength isn't what it took," I corrected him. "It took remembering that victims matter more than blood relations. Every elderly person Marcus targeted was someone's parent, grandparent, loved one. I failed to protect my wife. I couldn't fail them too." That evening, I met with the victims' families at a support group Jenny had organized. We shared stories, resources, and slowly began healing together. The recovered funds were being distributed according to documented losses, though no amount could truly compensate for murdered loved ones. Harold Jennings Jr. announced he was establishing a foundation in his father's memory to educate seniors about financial fraud. The Chen family was donating their recovery to expand the program nationally. From tragedy, they built hope. "My dad would have liked this," Harold said. "Turning something awful into something helpful. It's what that generation did, isn't it? Survived everything and kept building better." Jenny had news of her own. "I've been accepted to law school," she announced to applause. "Decided tending bar wasn't enough. I want to prosecute these cases, make sure what happened to our families stops happening." I offered to write her recommendation letters, connect her with prosecution mentors. She'd make an excellent advocate, her personal loss driving professional purpose. As the meeting concluded, Valerie arrived with Sophie. My granddaughter hid behind her mother, initially peeking out with curious eyes that struck me anew with their resemblance to Martha. "Sophie, this is your grandfather," Valerie said gently. "Remember the pictures I showed you?" Sophie stepped forward slowly, clutching a worn teddy bear. "Your daddy's daddy." "Yes." I managed through the lump in my throat. "And your grandmother's husband. Mommy says Grandma is in heaven. Is that true?" I knelt to her level, choosing honesty, tempered with kindness. "Yes, sweetheart. But she loved you very much, even though she didn't get to meet you. Would you like to hear stories about her?" Sophie nodded solemnly, then surprised me by taking my hand. "Can we visit her? Mommy says she has a special stone with her name." "We can visit her anytime you'd like," I promised. She has beautiful flowers there and birds that sing in the morning. She would have loved showing you both." Over the following weeks, I began building a relationship with my granddaughter. Sophie was bright, inquisitive, and possessed Martha's gentle nature despite her chaotic early years. Valerie had done an amazing job protecting and raising her alone. During one visit, Sophie asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why doesn't Daddy visit? Is he mad at me?" I'd prepared for this with Valerie's permission. "Your daddy made some bad choices and has to stay somewhere special to learn better ways. It's not about you, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make mistakes that take a long time to fix. Like Time Out, but bigger." "Exactly like Time Out, but bigger," I agreed, marveling at her understanding. Sophie considered this seriously, then patted my hand with startling maturity. "It's okay, Grandpa. You can teach me the good choices instead." That night, I updated Martha's headstone with a small addition, "Beloved Grandmother." Standing in the cemetery with Sophie's hand in mine, I felt Martha's presence in the evening breeze. "She's wonderful," I whispered to the stone. "Everything you would have wanted in a granddaughter. I'm sorry you didn't get to see her grow, but I promise she'll know all about you. Every story, every tradition, every bit of love you saved for grandchildren." Sophie placed wildflowers she'd picked on the grave, arranging them with careful precision. "Hi, Grandma," she said simply. "Grandpa says you liked flowers." I picked the prettiest ones. As we walked back to the car, Sophie asked, "Grandpa, are you sad?" I considered the question honestly. "Sometimes yes, but having you here makes me happy too. Your grandmother would say that's how life works, mixing sad and happy, until we find meaning in both." "Like chocolate milk," Sophie declared. "Dark and light mixed together makes something better." Martha would have loved that analogy. As I buckled Sophie into her car seat, I realized this was Martha's true legacy. Not the law bearing her name, or the criminals behind bars, but this bright-eyed child who'd carry forward her grandmother's kindness. The drive home took us past the warehouse where I'd discovered Marcus's operation. It was being demolished, replaced by affordable senior housing. From the ashes of crime, the community built something worthwhile. My phone rang as we parked. Diane calling from Boston. "Dad, the legislation passed. Martha's Law is officially federal statute. Enhanced penalties for elder fraud, mandatory minimums for cases involving death, and funding for prevention programs. Your mother would be proud," I told her watching Sophie chase butterflies in the yard. "Of the law of you, of how we've honored her memory." "Are you okay, Dad? Really okay?" I thought about it, seeing Sophie laugh as a butterfly landed on her outstretched hand. "I'm getting there. We have a granddaughter to raise, right? That helps more than anything." "I'm flying out next week," Diane said. "Sophie needs to meet her aunt. Maybe we can start some new family traditions." After ending the call, I sat on the porch watching Sophie play. In 6 months, I'd lost my son to darkness, but found my granddaughter in light. The price of justice had been steep, but the rewards of truth were beginning to bloom. Christmas morning arrived with fat snowflakes drifting past my kitchen window. Sophie burst through the door at 7 sharp, Valerie trailing behind with amused exhaustion. "Grandpa, it's Christmas. Did Santa find your house?" Sophie's excitement filled rooms that had been silent since Martha's passing. "He certainly did," I assured her, leading her to the living room where presents surrounded the Fraser fir we'd decorated together. "But first, what do we do on Christmas morning?" "Pancakes!" Sophie shouted, already climbing onto her special stool by the stove. "With Grandma's secret ingredient." We'd been rebuilding Martha's traditions one by one. Sophie wore the tiny apron Martha had bought years ago, just in case we ever had grandchildren. As I taught her to fold blueberries into batter, I could almost feel Martha guiding my hands. 6 months had passed since Marcus's sentencing. He'd received 27 years federal time, no parole possibility for 15. His accomplices got similar sentences, though Eddie faced additional state charges for the murders. The warehouse had been replaced by the Martha Patterson Senior Center, where Jenny now worked part-time while attending law school. "Grandpa, why do we put cinnamon in?" Sophie asked, carefully measuring the spice. "Because your grandmother believed every recipe needs a little something extra, something that makes it special. Like people. We all have our special ingredients that make us who we are." Valerie smiled from the doorway. These months had transformed her, too. No longer running scared, she'd enrolled in nursing school with help from the Victim Restitution Fund. Sophie finally had stability, routine, and family. After breakfast, we gathered around the tree. I'd saved Martha's ornaments, each one, now carrying stories I shared with Sophie. The paper angel Marcus made in second grade still topped the tree. Even knowing what he'd become couldn't erase the innocent child he'd been. "This one's from me and Mommy." Sophie handed me a wrapped box, bouncing with anticipation. Inside lay a photo album titled Grandpa and Sophie's Adventures. They documented our months together, visiting Martha's grave, baking cookies, feeding ducks at the park, Sophie's first piano lesson on Martha's old upright. The final page held a drawing of our family, including a figure labeled Grandma in Heaven, watching over us. "So you don't forget," Sophie explained seriously. "Mommy says sometimes grown-ups need help remembering happy things." I pulled her into a hug, voice thick with emotion. "This is perfect, sweetheart. The best gift anyone could give." Diane arrived that afternoon with her family from Boston. Watching Sophie play with her cousins, hearing laughter fill the house, I felt Martha's absence sharper than ever. But it wasn't the crushing grief anymore. More like a gentle ache, reminder of love that transcends loss. "Dad." Diane pulled me aside while kids opened presents. "I have news." Marcus filed an appeal. My stomach tightened. "On what grounds?" "Claiming emotional manipulation, says you entrapped him by playing on his feelings," she snorted. "Judge threw it out in minutes. The evidence is bulletproof, Dad. He's not getting out." Relief washed through me. Sophie didn't need that shadow returning to her life. "Does he know about her?" The courts informed him of his daughter's existence but denied all custody claims. "Valerie has sole rights with you, named emergency guardian." Diane squeezed my shoulder. "He made his choices. Now we protect Sophie from them." That evening, after turkey and Martha's famous apple pie, we gathered in the living room. Snow fell heavily outside, creating the perfect Christmas backdrop. Sophie curled against me on the couch, fighting sleep, while cousins played board games. "Grandpa," she murmured, "do you think Daddy will ever be good again?" The question I dreaded most. "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes people lose their way so badly it takes a very long time to find it again. But that's not your worry. Your job is to grow up kind and strong and happy." "Like Grandma?" "Exactly like Grandma." She fell asleep, clutching her new teddy bear, and I carried her to the guest room Martha had always hoped would house grandchildren. Tucking her in, I noticed she'd placed the photo album on the nightstand, open to a picture of Martha from our last anniversary. Downstairs, the adults gathered around the fireplace. Valerie raised a mug of cocoa. "To Martha." None of us met her, but her love shaped everything good happening here. We toasted my wife, whose death had unveiled such darkness, but whose memory now fostered light. Jenny called from the senior center where she was hosting Christmas dinner for elderly residents without family. Several were victims Marcus had targeted, now protected by programs funded through recovered assets. "Mr. Patterson," she said over cheerful background noise, "thought you should know Harold Jennings Jr. just announced full funding for a nationwide elder fraud prevention program. Says his dad would have wanted their tragedy to protect others." Another light from darkness. Martha's Law had passed inspiring state-level legislation nationwide. The FBI created a dedicated elder crimes unit using my investigation templates. Marcus's crime ring, meant to exploit the vulnerable, had instead triggered systematic protections that would save thousands. A knock at the door interrupted our celebration. I found a young woman on the porch nervously clutching an envelope. "Mr. Patterson, I'm Amy Chen, my grandmother. She was one of the victims." I invited her in from the cold, introducing her to the family. She'd driven from California, needing to deliver something personally. Grandma left letters for everyone. Amy explained producing aged envelopes. She wrote them when she got sick, knowing something was wrong but not what. This one's addressed to the one who stops him. With trembling hands, I opened Mrs. Chen's letter. To whoever reads this, I know someone is taking more than money. They think we're weak, confused, disposable. But we lived through wars, depressions, losses they can't imagine. We're stronger than they know. If you're reading this, you stopped them. Thank you for seeing our worth when they saw only our weakness. Use what I lost to protect others. That's all an old woman can ask. I shared the letter with everyone, Mrs. Chen's words reaching across death to remind us why justice mattered. Amy stayed for pie, sharing stories of her grandmother's resilience that Marcus never bothered learning. As midnight approached and guests departed, I stood alone in my study, looking at photos covering the walls. Martha, featured in most but new editions, showed Sophie's growing presence. The investigation materials were boxed away, replaced by finger paintings and school projects. The phone rang, unusual for Christmas night. The caller ID showed the Federal Detention Center. This is a collect call from inmate Marcus Patterson. Will you accept? I almost declined, then remembered it was Christmas. Yes. Dad. Marcus sounded hollow, desperate. Merry Christmas. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I asked, why did you call Marcus? I don't know. Maybe because it's Christmas and I remembered when things were different. When I was different. His voice cracked. Is it true about Sophie? Yes. Is she okay? She's wonderful. Smart, kind, everything you could hope for in a daughter. Does she know about me? She knows you made mistakes and have to stay away. Nothing more specific. I heard him crying, maybe the first honest emotion he'd shown in years. Dad, I'm sorry. Not for getting caught. For all of it. For Mom. For becoming someone she'd hate. For destroying everything you taught me. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead Marcus. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know I'm starting to understand what I took from everyone. Not just money, lives, families, trust. He paused. The chaplain here says redemption takes a lifetime. Guess I've got time. 27 years of it, I reminded him. Will you? Could you send pictures of Sophie? I won't contact her. Won't cause problems. I just want to see that something good exists, despite what I did. I considered it long and hard. I'll think about it. But Marcus, understand this. Any contact depends entirely on you becoming someone worthy of that little girl's eventual forgiveness. Not my forgiveness. Hers. I understand. Dad, thank you for stopping me. I couldn't see it then, but you saved me from becoming even worse. The call ended with neither forgiveness nor condemnation, just acknowledgement of what was lost and what might possibly be rebuilt over decades. I returned to the living room where Sophie had wandered back, rubbing sleepy eyes. Who was on the phone, Grandpa? Someone wishing us Merry Christmas. I said, simply lifting her back to carry upstairs. That's nice, she yawned. Everyone should have someone for Christmas. Even those in prison. Even those who'd shattered every trust. Because Sophie was right. Christmas meant hope for redemption, even when it seemed impossible. That was Martha's final gift, a granddaughter whose innocent wisdom could find light in any darkness. The next morning brought calls from journalists wanting year-later retrospectives on the case. I declined them all. The story wasn't about me or even Marcus anymore. It was about Sophie starting kindergarten, Jenny finishing her first semester of law school, the senior center serving hundreds, and Martha's law protecting thousands. I found Sophie in the kitchen, standing on her stool, and carefully making pancakes from memory. For you, Grandpa, she announced proudly. With the secret ingredient. Watching her concentrate, tongue poking out, just like Martha when she focused, I understood the true measure of justice. Not just the guilty punished, but the innocent, protected, and cherished. Marcus stole money and lives, but he couldn't steal the love that survived his crimes. Sophie, I said helping her flip a perfect pancake. What do you want to be when you grow up? She considered seriously, then smiled with pure certainty. Like you and Grandma. Someone who helps people and makes good choices and knows all the secret ingredients. Outside, snow covered the landscape in pristine white, hiding yesterday's scars under tomorrow's possibilities. Sophie hummed while cooking a tune Martha used to sing. Life continued scarred, but not broken, finding joy in small moments and profound connections. My phone buzzed with a text from Rita Hawkins. Annual training on elder fraud prevention starts Monday. You're still our best instructor. These new agents need to hear the Patterson case from the source. I confirmed my attendance, knowing each class might prevent another Marcus, save another Martha. The cycle of protection would continue, built on painful experience, but pointed toward hope. Grandpa, Sophie announced, presenting slightly lopsided pancakes with pride. Breakfast is served. We sat together at Martha's table, sharing stories and planning adventures. Later, we'd visit the cemetery, then the senior center where Sophie had become everyone's honorary granddaughter. Life in all its complexity moved forward. And if sometimes I woke at night remembering my son's crimes and my wife's stolen years, I'd peek into Sophie's room and watch her sleep peacefully. She was the answer to every doubt, proof that love triumphs over betrayal, and good can bloom from devastating evil. The world had tried to teach Marcus that the elderly were easy marks, their trust a weakness to exploit. Instead, he learned that underestimating love's power to seek justice was the greatest mistake of all. Now serving decades in federal prison, he had time to ponder how different life might have been if he'd chosen to protect rather than prey upon those who loved him. Meanwhile, Sophie grew surrounded by that protective love, carrying forward Martha's legacy in ways none of us imagined. Each bedtime story, every baking lesson, all the small moments of connection rebuilt what greed had torn down. So if you've stayed with me through this journey, witnessing how quickly love can turn to betrayal, but also how justice can bloom from tragedy's soil, I leave you with this thought. The elderly in your life aren't just repositories of resources to be managed or burdens to be minimized. They're libraries of experience, guardians of memory, and bridges between what was and what will be. Value them, protect them, learn from them while you can. Because sometimes the confused old man in the pub isn't confused at all. Sometimes he's a federal investigator documenting your crimes. Sometimes the sweet grandmother knows exactly what you're doing with her pills. And sometimes justice comes disguised as vulnerability, waiting for evil to reveal itself before striking with devastating precision. But more importantly, remember that every elderly person you meet is someone's Martha Harold or Mrs. Chen. They've loved, deeply lost profoundly, and deserve to live their final chapters with dignity, not deception. They've earned respect through survival, not suspicion born of greed. In a world that often values youth over wisdom and quick profits over lasting connections, choosing to protect rather than exploit makes you part of Martha's legacy too. It makes you someone Sophie would be proud to know, someone who sees strength in trust rather than opportunity in vulnerability. What family traditions do you cherish from your grandparents, and how do you keep their memory alive? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's celebrate the wisdom and love of those who came before us. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of justice and redemption. And share this with someone who needs reminding that our elders are treasures, not targets. Thank you for joining me on this painful, but ultimately hopeful journey. May you find, as I did, that even the darkest betrayals can't extinguish the light of love properly directed. Until next time, hold your loved ones close, honor those who've passed, and remember, the best inheritance isn't money, but the values that outlive us all.